change gears to risk-taking in a business context, meaning you're not looking to make a change or find work if you needed to, but you're in role and you're wondering what are the merits of risk-taking. I think you've already addressed some of these in the individual career context, but do those merits change at all when you're simply seeking to create growth for your company? What should you be thinking about when you're managing risk and taking smart risks?
You have to keep a balance. You're running a company, you have to keep a balanced perspective. It's always the key. Like I said in the beginning, you've got this bell curve. If all you're thinking about is all these great things you can take if your risks work out, you get blinded when you take dumb risks. And if all you're thinking about is kind of protecting what you've got right now, you don't take enough risk. So you got to keep a balanced perspective. You know, and on one side, here it's like two forces pushing at each other. And on one side, you've got progress, growth, innovation, organizational engagement, feeling of excitement. On the other side, we could lose control. All these other lose a sense of progress. We could fail. You're going back and forth. And I think executives need to infuse that balanced perspective in their own mind, in their team dialogues, almost kind of playing the devil. A great executive plays the devil's advocate, which means if she is seeing lots of cautious dialogue in an executive meeting, she's offering up the push, how do we take more risk? If she's seeing everyone running towards these risky things, she's offering up that cautious counterbalance.
Right.
And it's that counterbalance, and great teams are able to do that with each other. That's really important in business. So merits, yes. Costs, check. We see them both. We've got to have balanced conversations. Take smart risks.
Is it hard in business, Doug, to distinguish at times between good, smart risk and recklessness? Do they sometimes dress the same, but man, they're so different, right?
They are, and I think it comes down. It can come down to a lot of things. I'll tell you one of the big things it comes down to is not being truly in the mind of your customer, not being really just truly understanding what's going on. There's a great story that I covered in my book about Sherwin-Williams paint.
Yeah.
Sherwin-Williams, the 2008 financial crisis hits, and most paint companies are retreating. They're closing stores, taking costs off the book. Sherwin-Williams, exact opposite. They're opening up new stores all over the place. Shareholders are pushing back. It seems to an outsider a bit of a reckless decision, financially reckless decision. But the reason they were able to take that smart risk and make that bet was because they had 20 years of data which proved to them that this very specific thing, a very specific insight they had 20 years earlier, which was we need real estate in lots of places to create a network effect in a given market, let's say Houston, that when a painter's, their main business, their main people who buy from them are contractors, they're not everyday people in the home. And the insight they had was, hey, we have to have shops everywhere because they may love Sherwin-Williams paint, but the reality is if they have to drive by a few Benjamin Moore paint stores on the way to they're just going to start shopping there. We need lots of stores. So they had this insight. They tried to get a bunch of real estate. Everyone else had the same insight, and they couldn't play that game. And then the bust happens in 2008. All these people leave real estate, and they said, what an opportunity. Let's jump on it. Let's buy. Now, they were so in the minds of what their customers wanted that they were willing to make a bet, a contrarian bet in the moment. And it paid off. It took a few years, but it paid off. So their shareholders were saying reckless. They were saying smart risk. Had they not had that customer data, yeah, that might have been a reckless thing to do, but they did. And so they were able to make a smart bet. And I could go on. There's tons of stories like that, where most of the time, when you see someone making a courageous decision in business, and it works out, it wasn't luck. They were really in the minds of their customers. They had an insight.
Yeah.
They're spending a lot of time with that. It's really important.
Let's stick with that example because I'm curious if you can share how Sherwin-Williams managed the expectations of the shareholders who clearly didn't have that customer insight that the company did. they thought it was recklessness, but their vantage point was different. How does a Sherwin-Williams actually, again, going back to the example of, this, tell their shareholders, trust us, this is going to be a good bet?
It takes good leaders. I mean, you're talking about it. You're talking about a narrative there, based in research, based in customer insight, that a senior executive and a senior executive team has to be fully in control of, and they have to be willing to stand their ground to a bunch of shareholders pushing back, and take it. And that's a level of conviction that a good executive has. Again, not grounded in just gut sense. It's grounded in data, but that in and of itself is a risk, and that's great leadership, to be able to do that, to stand that ground.
I've heard a lot of CEOs say that, well, we want to keep our company small. It's mobile, we act quickly, the market likes it this way, and so on. Great idea. Are larger companies naturally more risk averse than smaller? Is there something there that larger companies can learn from the smaller ones?
I think that larger companies tend to just breed, for lack of a better term, more risk aversion. You've got big revenue streams. Clayton Christensen did a good job talking about this in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma, a number of years ago. You've got big revenue streams you're trying to protect. It is just naturally a bit harder. But I think the thing to remember is that, again, going back to this concept of smart risk-taking, they can be small. The risks can be small. They can be little things. There can be ways to carve out, for example, I know that the way that Crest White Strips was turned out to be a blockbuster product, was able to be successful, was they carved off a separate kind of Skunk Works division that was totally separate from the rest of Crest at P&G. And they gave them a mandate for developing a product totally in isolation. And so there are little things. You can create these pods, and there's lots of ways companies do them, create pods of innovation, pods of risk-taking, to get away from the mothership, so to speak, that recreates a little bit of that small company innovation. Do they work all the time? No, because they're still the tether to the big company, and culturally there can be some challenges. It's just not easy to do. But big companies, I think, can learn from small companies in creating those pods and cultures of small company sort of innovation, which can be helpful.